All right, welcome to the deep dive. We're diving deep into IELTS listening today, specifically for those of you aiming high, like band 7, 8, maybe even that coveted 9.
We're going way beyond the usual practice, listen carefully stuff. You're here for the real secret sauce, right? The kind of bonus tips that separate a good score from a truly great one.
That's exactly it. We've got this source material packed with insights, and we're going to pull out the most potent stuff, the kind of stuff that most people overlook. You ready to elevate your game?
Let's do it. This isn't about reinventing the wheel, but more like fine-tuning your engine for peak performance. We're talking about those small tweaks that yield massive gains on test day.
So let's start by debunking some common myths and tackling those pesky mistakes that can really trip you up. One thing our source is crystal clear about is instructions.
Yeah, instructions. They're not just suggestions, especially when it comes to word limits. You gotta treat those limits like they're written in stone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No more than 2 words means exactly that. Not 3, not 4.
Exactly. Even if you've got the right answer, going over that limit is an instant 0 points. Brutal, but true.
It's all about precision, isn't it? So, before the audio even starts, what can listeners do during that pre-listening phase to get a head start?
Think of those 30 seconds as your recon mission. You're not just reading the questions, you're scouting the terrain.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So, how do we effectively scout the terrain, so to speak?
Okay, first, identify the question type. Is it a gap fill where you're likely needing a noun or a number? Or is it a multiple choice where you'll be choosing a reason or a description? That gives you a framework.
Makes sense. So we're not just randomly reading, we're reading with purpose.
Right. Then underline keywords. Let's say you see the museum's new blank is incredibly popular. You're immediately primed to listen for what kind of exhibit it is.
So you're setting mental traps for the information.
Precisely. Now, maintaining focus throughout the entire recording, that's a challenge.
Huge challenge,
Yeah.
especially since you only get one shot at it. What does our source suggest for staying locked in?
Practice is key. Full-length practice tests, timed conditions, the whole 9 yards. We'll dig into that more later.
But for right now, in that exam room, how do we fight off those mental distractions?
Those key words you underlined, those become your anchors. Whenever you feel your focus drifting, bring yourself back to those words. Even if you zone out for a second, don't panic, just refocus on the next question.
It's a bit like mindfulness, being present in the moment with the audio.
Exactly. Now, it's not just about understanding what you hear. It's about precision in your answers, too. Spelling and grammar matter.
You mean, like, I can get the answer right but still lose points?
Unfortunately, yes. Even if you've identified the correct information, a misspelled word or a grammatical error in your written answer is gonna cost you.
That's rough. So that final 10 minutes for transferring answers, it's not just about speed, is it?
Nope. It's your last chance to catch those tiny errors that can make a big difference in your score. Our source stresses this. Presentation is as crucial as comprehension.
All right, so accuracy is king. Now, the IELTS is notorious for using paraphrasing, which means you won't hear the exact words from the question in the audio. How can we train our ears to listen for meaning, not just words?
It's about developing a more flexible understanding of the language. Our source recommends immersing yourself in various types of English audio. Think news, podcasts, lectures, even things like audiobooks.
And what's the benefit of listening to such a wide range of materials?
You start to recognize how the same idea can be expressed in different ways, using different vocabulary and structures. Then, when you review the transcripts, you can see exactly how those ideas were paraphrased.
Oh, so it's like building up a mental database of synonyms and different ways of expressing the same concept.
That's a great way to put it. The more you expose yourself to this variety, the less likely you are to be thrown off by paraphrasing on the test.
Our source also has a warning. Don't be too quick to write down your answer. Why the hesitation?
Because sometimes speakers will clarify or even correct themselves later in the sentence. You might think you've got the answer, but then they add a crucial detail that changes everything.
It's like they're throwing in little curveballs to test your listening skills.
Exactly. So let the speaker finish their thought before you commit to an answer. Better to be sure than sorry.
That's great advice. Now, before we move on, let's circle back to time management during that checking and transferring phase. Any final tips for making the most of those precious minutes?
Be systematic. First, transfer all your answers carefully, double-checking those question numbers as you go.
Okay, that's step 1. What about after everything's transferred?
Then, and this is crucial, go back and quickly reread each question and your corresponding answer. Look for spelling errors, grammar issues, and of course, make sure you've stuck to those word limits.
So even a quick scan can catch those little slip-ups that can cost you points.
Absolutely. It's all about maximizing those final minutes to ensure every answer is as accurate and clear as possible.
Okay, we've covered the pitfalls. Now let's get proactive. Our source offers some fantastic techniques for actively improving your listening skills. Let's start with utilizing diverse English audio and those helpful transcripts.
Transcripts are like gold for practicing active listening. First, listen to a piece of audio without the transcript. Really challenge yourself.
Got it. No peeking.
Then, bring in the transcript. But don't just read it passively, analyze it. Where did you have trouble? Did you miss specific words or maybe misunderstand a whole phrase?
So you're using the transcript to pinpoint your weaknesses.
Exactly. That way, you're not just practicing, you're practicing strategically.
Now, another challenge of the IELTS is the variety of accents you'll encounter. Our source really stresses the importance of getting comfortable with those differences.
Think of it like this. The more accents you're exposed to, the less likely you are to be thrown off by an unfamiliar one on test day.
So how can our listeners immerse themselves in that world of accents?
Audiobooks are great. Choose books narrated by speakers from different English-speaking countries.
I've never thought of that. What else?
International news broadcasts. Listen to the BBC, CNN, Australian news channels. The goal is to train your ear to process different rhythms, intonations, even slang.
It's like expanding your sonic vocabulary.
Yes. And the more you expand it, the more confident you'll be when faced with any accent on the exam.
Our source is a big fan of the Cambridge IELTS practice tests. What makes them so essential for prep?
These are official past papers, so they're as close to the real thing as you can get. The format, the question types, the difficulty level, it's all there.
So it's not just about practicing content, but also getting used to the structure and flow of the actual exam.
Absolutely. And because they use authentic recordings with a variety of accents, you're really getting a full dress rehearsal for test day. Plus, doing these tests under timed conditions helps you gauge your pacing.
So it's about building both skills and confidence. Now, our source mentions a technique called shadowing. Could you break that down for us?
It's pretty cool, actually. You listen to a piece of audio and try to repeat what you hear, almost simultaneously, like a shadow.
Sounds tricky. What's the benefit?
It forces you to really focus on the sounds of the language, improving your pronunciation and intonation. But more importantly, it boosts your comprehension. By trying to mimic the speaker, you become more attuned to the rhythm and flow of their speech.
It's like you're syncing up with their brainwaves.
In a way, yeah. It helps you process the language more efficiently, which obviously leads to better understanding.
All right, so we're shadowing, we're doing practice tests. Now, time management during the exam itself, our source mentions using those 30 seconds before each section strategically. How do we do that?
We touched on this earlier, but those 30 seconds are golden. Use them to quickly scan the questions, understand what they're asking, and underline key terms.
So we're priming our brains to listen for specific information.
Exactly. It's like giving your brain a roadmap before you start driving.
Now, with so much information being thrown at you, it can feel overwhelming. Our source advises focusing on keywords rather than trying to understand every single word.
Oh.
How does that help?
Trying to grasp every word can lead to mental overload and, ironically, cause you to miss crucial details.
So it's a bit like information overload.
Exactly. By targeting your listening, focusing on names, places, times, reasons, you're essentially filtering out the noise and honing in on the answers.
It's about strategic listening, not just passive listening.
Precisely. You're listening with a purpose.
And speaking of strategic listening, note-taking, how can we jot down key information effectively without missing what comes next?
Think efficiency. Abbreviations, symbols, bullet points, whatever works for you. Don't waste time writing full sentences.
So it's almost like creating your own code.
Exactly. The goal is to capture enough information to jog your memory later when you transfer your answers.
Got it. It's a memory aid, not a full transcript.
Precisely.
Now, our source suggests getting familiar with the common IELTS listening question types. Why is that so beneficial?
It's all about anticipation. If you know the different question formats, multiple choice, sentence completion, matching, labeling, all of them, you can predict what kind of information you'll need to listen for.
So if you know the game, you can play it better.
Exactly. For instance, if you see a map labeling question, you know you're going to be listening for directions and descriptions of locations.
It helps you focus your listening.
Mhm.
Now, we talked about prediction earlier, but our source emphasizes it throughout. How can we refine our ability to predict answers based on context?
This is where practice really pays off. You start to recognize patterns and common IELTS themes. Before the audio even starts for a specific question, look at the surrounding words or the answer choices. What kind of information would logically fit there?
It's like solving a puzzle.
Right. You're using the clues to guide your listening. Even if you're not 100% sure, having a prediction in mind primes your brain to catch the relevant information.
It's like giving your brain a head start.
Exactly. And finally, building a consistent listening routine. This is crucial, according to our source. What kind of activities should we include? Mix it up. Formal stuff like news reports and lectures, but also casual things like podcasts and conversations. Aim for daily exposure, even if it's just for 15 or 20 minutes.
The key is consistency, right?
Absolutely. And make it active listening, not just background noise. Really engage with the material.
All right, we've tackled pitfalls, we've covered active improvement. Now let's get to the good stuff, the bonus strategies. Our source lays out some really powerful tips for pushing your score even higher. And the first one is about staying calm, especially if you miss an answer. Why is panicking so detrimental?
Panic is contagious. If you dwell on a missed answer, you're likely to miss the next one and the one after that. It's like a domino effect.
So it's not just about losing one point, it's about losing your momentum.
Exactly. The key is to acknowledge the miss, take a breath, and immediately refocus on the current question.
It's about mental resilience. Don't let one setback derail your entire performance.
Precisely.
Now, that final 10 minutes for transferring answers and checking, we've talked about it, but our source really highlights its strategic importance. How can we use that time to our absolute advantage?
It's about being meticulous and systematic. First, transfer your answers carefully, double-checking that you're writing them next to the correct question number.
Okay, accuracy is paramount. What then?
Then, and this is where the real magic happens, use the remaining time to reread each question and your corresponding answer. Look for spelling errors, grammar slips, and ensure you've adhered to those word limits.
It's your last line of defense against those careless mistakes.
Exactly. And you'd be surprised how many points you can recover with just a quick review.
Another bonus tip is about building listening stamina. How can we develop the endurance we need to stay focused throughout the entire test?
This goes back to simulating the real exam experience during practice. Regularly take full-length IELTS listening tests, timed, in a quiet environment, no breaks.
So it's like training for a marathon.
It is. You're building up your mental muscles to handle the duration and intensity of the actual test.
And speaking of simulating real-world conditions, our source also talks about training our ears to filter out distractions. Why is that important, and how do we do it?
Because real life is full of distractions. And sometimes even IELTS recordings can throw in background noise or overlapping conversations to challenge you.
So how do we prepare for that?
Practice listening to English audio in environments with some level of background sound. Maybe a cafe or a park where there are people talking nearby. This helps your brain learn to tune out irrelevant sounds and focus on the main speaker.
It's about training your auditory focus. Now, our source also mentions distractors within the audio itself. What are some common ways speakers might try to mislead us?
They might present information that sounds like the right answer but then correct themselves or contradict it later on. Or they might give several options before revealing the actual answer.
Sneaky.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid falling for these traps?
Listen critically for those subtle cues. Pay attention to shifts in the speaker's tone or wording that might indicate a change in direction. Don't just latch on to the first thing that sounds right. Wait for confirmation or clarification.
It's about active listening, not just passive hearing.
Exactly. You're analyzing the information, not just absorbing it. And finally, one of the most important bonus tips our source offers: trust your preparation.
Why is that so crucial, especially on test day?
Because second-guessing yourself can be your downfall. If you've prepared well and you're confident in your skills, trust your instincts. Don't let doubt creep in and make you change correct answers to incorrect ones.
It's about believing in yourself and the work you've put in.
Exactly, you've got this. Now, our source includes a final challenge that I think is really valuable.
Now tell us about it.
It involves listening to a short BBC News report and then comparing your notes with the transcript.
I like it. Why is that so effective?
It's a practical application of everything we've discussed. You get to test your skills in a real-world context and see how accurately you're able to capture the key information.
It's like putting all the pieces together.
Precisely. And by comparing your notes with the transcript, you get immediate feedback on your strengths and weaknesses.
So to wrap things up, mastering these bonus tips can truly elevate your IELTS listening score. It's about moving beyond the basics and developing those strategic skills that set you apart.
It's about precision, focus, confidence, and a deep understanding of the language and the test itself.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of IELTS listening. Hopefully, you're walking away with some valuable insights and a renewed sense of confidence.
We encourage you to take on that final challenge and apply these bonus tips in your next listening practice session. See what a difference they make.
Until our next deep dive, keep practicing, keep listening, and keep pushing yourselves to achieve your goals.
And one final thought to leave you with. Find some interesting English audio today, maybe a podcast, a news report, or a TED Talk, and consciously apply just one or two of the bonus tips we talked about while you listen. Notice how it affects your comprehension, your focus, and your overall listening experience.
Until next time, keep those ears sharp and those scores high.